Well, good morning and welcome. My name is Joel, and if I have not met you before, would love to meet you after the service. If this is your first time near to Grace, so glad that you're here. You are jumping in at a great time. We are in the midst of a series called The Way of Change. So we're in week 3 of that. Well, this is what we've been saying. Change is something we talk about this time of year. You run into a new year, you're talking about change. You're looking forward to change, right? And change is just inevitable. It's also interesting. It can be unique and hard. Change is across the board. It's all happened to us and will happen to us. And like I said, the first week I was up here introing the series, and I said, me and my wife on New Year's Eve, we laid our heads on the pillow about 10:30 at night, and we thought about 2019, and we looked back and said, wow, all the change that had taken place in 2019. And for some of us, we run into 2020 and we're like, wow, it's amazing, kind of the things that I get to look forward to or the change I'm looking forward to. And what I didn't tell you on that Sunday is that me and Jess are very excited for 2020 also, and we're looking forward to some things in 2020 because me and Jess are expecting our second little one coming in July. Yeah, so we are very excited for that to take place. And some of you have seen it on social media and all that stuff, so I thought I'd share it with you. But our world is about to change drastically, right? We go from zone defense to man, and we don't even know what to expect. And so we are very excited. If you're a parent in the room, just pray for us. If you're not a parent in the room, pray for us. Just everybody pray for us, right? But we are in this series. We'll jump into that, the way of change. This is what we said the first week. The way of change is following the way of Jesus, practicing his presence in my life. Now, if you you weren't here the first week, I would challenge you to go back onto our website and watch and listen into that first sermon. It really tees up for what we're talking about this whole series. This is what we said. We looked at John 15. John is writing about Jesus's kind of last moments with his disciples and what he's teaching them before he goes to the cross and dies. And this is what we said, change, okay? The tee up kind of the John 15 passage, change. Right? A lot of times we look at change in our lives, whether you're a follower of Christ or not, and we run into it thinking that willpower, and if I muster up enough energy, then I will be able to change, and I will be able to figure it out. We said willpower will not get you there. It's not possible. It's innate to us to think it will, and we want to pursue that. It won't get us there. And Jesus says some interesting things in John 15. He says to his disciples, right before he goes to the cross, remain in me. Remain in me and you will bear fruit. If you want to see change in your life, you have to stay connected to me. And he used the illustration of vine and branch, that we are the branch and he is the vine. And that the fruit that we see happen is not the goal, it is the byproduct. But to remain in him, to stay connected to Jesus, that is the goal. That's what we talked about the first week. We said saying yes to Jesus is where that starts. And he says, remain in me. And then Josiah, last week, he did a great job talking through our first practice, which is community. We talked through community. And we're like in community, we're doing these practices together, but community is a practice. It was fascinating listening to him because it struck me personally. We have all these different communities that we're involved in, but he asked the question, do you have real community? Like, are you really in community? Do you have honest relationships around you? And he looked at a passage in John 13 where Jesus is washing his disciples' feet. And he pulled out some things that community looks like loving and serving and sharing. Right? Are you in real community? I thought it was an awesome, fascinating conversation about that. This week we're going to run into a practice that I think totally changes the rhythm of our life. I think it's something that will totally change the rhythm of your life. It has for me. It has been something that I have had to navigate, and it's been striking to me as I've studied it. It is the practice of solitude. The practice of solitude. That is where we're going today. And before we get there, okay, I want to reference some books for you. If you're a reader or someone interested in going further in this conversation, in 30 or 40 minutes, I will not be able to cover all the ins and outs of what I've been able to study and look into, but these two books are well worth picking up. The Life You've Always Wanted by John Ortberg covers multiple practices. Okay, it covers multiple practices, but he has a chapter in the book. We're going to talk through some of what he's talking about, the unhurried life, it's called. And it's a a great chapter in that book that walks through the practice of solitude. The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer, another fabulous book. Doesn't just cover solitude, but kind of walks through that as one of the practices. I would pick one of those up. It is worth, especially if you're a reader, audiobook, Amazon has it, pick it up. It is totally worth your time. Here's the plan today, okay? Here's the plan today. 3 things, okay? We're going to start with the problem. We're going to start with the problem. We're going to start with the problem that is a barrier or that kind of creates conflict for us to put solitude into practice. Okay, and I think the problem isn't just with the practice of solitude and us not getting to that point, but I think it's a problem that circumferences businesses and people, families, culture, society in general. It's this problem. And then we're going to go to this. How did Jesus practice solitude? Okay, how did Jesus practice this? And then how do we practice solitude? What does that look like? Okay, so I just laid out the whole sermon for you. Simple, boom, boom, boom. We're going to hit it just like that. But I want to start by praying because I think we need to enter into that first, and then we'll navigate the conversation from there. Father, we thank you so much for who you are and all that you do. Father, this is a loaded conversation, and by no means am I an expert. By no means is this even fleshed out in my life fully. And Father, I pray that you would speak words and truth into all of us this morning. Father, I pray for those in this congregation that are just exhausted right now. They're just running 1,000 miles per hour, and this is the moment they get to sit and be with you. And Father, I pray that you would speak truth, change hearts and minds this morning, and what it means to enter into this practice of solitude. But ultimately, I pray that you would change and shift and kind of work in hearts and minds for us to focus on Jesus this morning. That's where it's at. And so I pray that this would all bring us to that point. And Father, I pray that you would do that. Lead us in that. Father, we thank you so much for who you are and all that you do. Praise in your name. Amen. Like I said, we're going to start with the problem. I love starting with problems because that's just kind of where we all need to start at, right? The problem is this. The problem, it focuses in on not just a lack of us putting this practice into play, but it runs throughout our culture and our society. Okay, it runs through individuals, it runs through businesses, it runs through organizations. It is something that just has set the pace of our life. And this is what I would state it as hurry sickness. Hurry sickness. You want a little definition under that? This is what the definition is. Hurry sickness is trying to fit more activities, events, to-dos into less time so we can get more done. Okay, that is the definition of hurry sickness. It's not original to me. It's original to John Ortberg, who writes one of these books. And it's fascinating as you look into this. We're going to flesh this out. It's fascinating, like I said, in our society and in our culture, like this is where we sit at. We sit in a hurry sickness state. And we're going to take it to the individual level, which will be fun. But as I was reading and studying, something popped out to me as we look at society and culture. Back in 1960s, there were some researchers. So Time magazine looked back at the 1960s, saw some researchers looking at the future of time management. They were saying, we want to hypothesize 20, 25 years from now what time management is going to look like. So these researchers, this is what they concluded. They said with all the increases of technology, and with all the pluses to technology and how it's growing so fast, in 20 or 25 years, people will be working less hours during the week. They'll be taking way more vacations than they are now, and they will be forced to retire sooner because work is not what they'll be concerned about. They said this. They said the worry for people is not what do I do with all this work time and how do I fill all these work gaps, but how am I going to fill all the free time that I have in my life? I don't know about you, but I'm not sitting around on my couch asking myself, what am I going to do with all this free time I have? The opposite has happened. The opposite has happened. The problem is not what do we do with all this free time, it's how do we fill in all of this work time that we have and all these things that we have to do into our week. It is absolutely impossible. So you see it in businesses, right? You see it in our work life. You see it in organizations all flesh out, but you also see it in promotion and marketing. This is where our world is at. Domino's has, I don't know if this is fact, or they say it, they said, if we don't deliver in 30 minutes or less, it's free. Now, I don't know how you can finagle that to try that, but right, they are quick. They want to be hurry and hustle and get the pizza there. Jimmy John's, their slogan is freaky fast, right? Our delivery is freaky fast. Amazon, about a year or two ago, I saw this. Amazon now does one-day delivery, that if you order on Thursday morning, you get it by Friday afternoon. Boom, right at your door, right? Our world is going at the pace of hurry. John Mark Comer says this: free time used to be a sign of wealth. Now busyness is a sign of wealth, right? The pace is at hurry. It's fascinating. We are the wealthiest, or one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and yet we are so poor in our time management and just time in general. We are a society and a culture that runs and runs and runs and runs and runs. You see it, like I said, in those researchers, right? We don't have all this free time. We're worried about work. We're working on weekends. We're trying to fill it all in so that we can get it done. But even in our promotion, we see it on the TV, we see it on the computer, and even in our individual lives, we see it. We're going to walk through some hurry sickness symptoms that I want you to take a quiz on. Because here's the thing. We need to take it down to the individual level. How does this relate to each and every one of us? And let me just set it up well for you. I'm the worst at it, okay? I'm the worst at it, so you're welcome to judge me as we walk through these questions. I failed this quiz miserably, okay? So I'm not an expert at this. So I'm coming from very, very much a place of humility, because these studies in this book, like, wow. This is how it is fleshed out in my life. But I want you to write these questions down. And I want you to take a quiz, okay? I want you to take a quiz and see where you rank on these questions, okay? First one is this: are you constantly trying to get more done during the day? Write it down. Just think about it, right? Are you trying to get more done, constantly trying to get more done throughout the day? My Thursdays, I spend at home with my son Corbin, okay? And so when I spend Thursdays at home with Corbin, I wake up and I do some different things, and then I make a list for the day. Whether it's emails or whether it's things get done for Jess or whether it's going shopping, things like that. And Corbin wakes up, I'm like, buddy, it's Thursday. We are going to get some things done today. And he's like a year old. He's like, I don't even know what's going on, right? But Thursdays are my day to fit in as much as I can so I can get stuff done. I am constantly on Friday afternoons thinking to myself, I didn't get all I wanted to get done during this week. You might feel that in your weeks. For some of us, we're constantly trying to get things done or get more done during the day. The next one, are you the supreme multitasker? You're the supreme multitasker, right? I will sit on my couch. I'll be talking to my lovely wife, Jessica. I'll be on my phone on Amazon. I will be managing my budget. I'll be emailing the staff and have a football game on the TV all at the same time, right? That is life sometimes. Don't judge me. You just have it going on. You're going crazy and you're trying to fit all these things in. Now, I was talking to a guy earlier this week. So I was studying for this, and he said, well, multitasking is not all bad. That's just kind of life sometimes. And if you're a mom, you understand multitasking is just a part of your life, right? Multitasking is not necessarily all the time bad. This is the question I've put underneath of that. Are you sacrificing relationships to multitask? Are you sacrificing relationships to multitask? I very often will sacrifice the relationship with my wife and time with my wife to multitask and get the things done that I need to get done in the evening. That was a silly example, but sometimes it fleshes out like that. The next question, is your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual life, one or all four, cluttered? Is this something where you're running and you're running and you're running and you have all these things you're thinking about, all these things you're downloading, and you just don't know the next step or where to go? It's just cluttered. And so you hit the pillow and you're like, I don't think I got anything done, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do tomorrow with it all. It's just a thought process that continually runs through my head. You're just there. Like I just made it to the pillow. Praise the Lord, right? Next one. Are you superficial in your relationships? Are you superficial in your relationships? I think this one is very striking to our culture. Right? We can have so many different communities, like Josiah said, but we're not real in the relationships. So the question is, are you investing into real, honest relationships? If you're married, I'd love to see your eyes. If you're married, I'd love to see your eyes, because I think marriages can suffer from hurry sickness the most. That you are running and running, and you have kids to take to practice, and you have school stuff, and you're working, and and then you get to 10 o'clock at night, you hit the pillow, and you look over, and you're like, who are you? what's going on, right? It just can become superficial. We're just running the kids around. We're just doing life. I've seen it happen, and it's scary. You get to that point, you're like, where do we go from here? Are your relations superficial? Not just marriages. I think it hits it the most in marriage, but across the board. The next question, wait a second. Do you struggle to express, feel, or demonstrate love? Do you struggle to express, feel, demonstrate love? I think this is played out in empathy and compassion most often. That we lack empathy and compassion when we're in such a hurry. John Ortberg says hurry and love cannot coexist. They can't. If you're hurrying around, you got to-dos, forget about it, put it in the past, rub some dirt on it, let's get going, we have to get things done, right? And you bypass the conversations that are needed, and you bypass loving someone who may be hurting or suffering in that moment. Do you struggle with that, right? I don't know where you're at on your paper, but by this time when I was walking through these questions, I was like, oh, I failed life, It's like awful. Where do you struggle with expressing love? Next, are you constantly overwhelmed by life? Oh, this is me to a T. I'll walk home, or I won't walk home, I'll drive home, I'll walk into the door. I started walking home now, We'll walk into the door and I'll see Jess and she notices I've had a rough day or it's stressful or it's busy and I'll have that on my face and she'll be like, how are you doing? Like, it's awful. Everything's awful. It's awful. It's just today was rough. I didn't do this, this, and this. And I'm stressed out of my mind. She's like, just tell me the things that are going on. Tell me I can help out maybe or things of that nature. I'm like, no, it's just overwhelming. I can't talk about it. Go to the living room. I'll sit down. About an hour later, I come to my senses. And I figure out as I talk it out, I only had like 3 things that I had to figure out, right? You get to that point, you're just overwhelmed because everything hit at once. And life just continually does that. You're just overwhelmed. It's all these things. And then you kind of like, oh, right? Next thing, does your identity come from your hurry? Ooh, this is a big one for me, right? You get the question, how you doing? I'm busy, right? Get that answer, right? It's just a natural answer that we'll flow into. How you doing? I got so much to do. I got so much running. It becomes your identity. It becomes your identity so much you don't even know why you're in a hurry. You just are. You're just running, right? The last one is this. Do you indulge in activities to cope with the hurry of life? Do you indulge in activities to cope with the hurry of life? I would say this is unhealthy, addictive indulges. Coping with it in a way that's indulging in addictive and unhealthy ways. John Mark Comer would call what I would say the number one distraction or the number one way that we cope with hurry. It's called digital distractions. Digital distractions. I don't know if you have an iPhone, but if you do have an iPhone, there's a setting on there or there's an app on there that allows you to view your screen time and how much time you spend on your phone. I would challenge you to either load up that app or get on your settings to look at it. Right? It is very stark in its answers, and the research tells itself, right? We spend multi-hours on our phones. I do myself. It's fascinating. They did a study on average, we touch our phone 2,617 times a day. That is a day. And if you're a millennial, it's more than that. Right? That's me, my age and younger, right? That's my age and younger. We use that all the time. Our phone is on there, our messaging, our emails. That's where we contact friends. That's where we do business. It is all on the phone. It's fascinating. They talk to young adults, so that's me and younger, but across the board, I think we struggle with this. And they said, what do you do when you're just standing in line somewhere, you're bored, or you have nothing to do? And 77% of them said the first thing I go to is my phone. That's what distracts me. That's what keeps me going. That's what I look to. We eat with our phone. We sleep by our phone. Our phone is in our car. That's where our GPS is. We do business on the phone. We have emails there, right? We communicate with friends and family on the phone. It is everywhere. Our phone is used for everything, and I'm not against phones, right? I'm not against phones, but it's just stark the reality of what we use our phones and how we use it to distract us. But not just that, I would call the next thing the black hole of entertainment. The black hole of entertainment, Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, Sling, it's where you get stuck in the binge watching, right? And you run to this distraction for days, maybe hours, weeks, maybe, I don't know, right? And you get stuck into this binge watching. And I don't know about you, I have done it before, and I don't walk away feeling joyful, excited, patient, and loving. It just kind of is like, oh, I just did that for 4 hours, right? You got the black hole of entertainment, and we run to these indulges. We run to these distractions, after we go through a week and we're just exhausted. I think we all hit a point of exhaustion. We're like, I don't know what to do or how to invest or where to go from there. So we run into these distractions to kind of cope with what's going on. We got to cope with getting to next Monday. So I'm like, oh, this is where I can lounge and just kind of view and do this. And we get to next Monday and the routine starts again, right? We run into indulging in these things to escape the world that we're running around in. So how did you score? Okay, how'd you score? I scored an 8 out of 8, okay? I scored 100% or failed it 100%, whatever way you want to look at it, right? But here's the thing. I did not ask those questions to be guiltful or to drive guilt or shame or to like, oh, we're calling out sins. No, we have to face the problem that is a reality in our lives, not just in our culture, not just in our society, but in our families, in us as individuals. Hurry is a routine part of the day. It's just routine for us. And my struggle is this. Personally, I struggle with kind of the high dopamine effect, the addictive effect it gives me, that I feel wanted and needed when I get the phone call, when my calendar fills up. I like being busy and having all these things happen. Like, hurry is addictive for some. Like, it's like, oh, this is fun and I can get going. But for others, hurry is a coping mechanism. Hurry is a coping mechanism against loneliness. That our culture doesn't know how to deal with loneliness. I use this illustration. It may make sense. It made sense to me, but it may make sense to you, it may not. But when you were a kid, or when I was a kid, there would be moments where I would get disciplined and be told to go to the timeout corner, or be told to go to my room, like take a timeout. Don't be on electronics or toys or anything like that. Like, you have to have a timeout. This is kind of the discipline. I'm not against that as a parent, but I think as adults, we fear the timeout corner. We fear it because that is what we relate to punishment and loneliness and unproductivity and uselessness and worthlessness. Well, if I'm just sitting here and not doing anything, I got to be in a hurry. I got to fill my time. I got to fill all these plates so that I don't worry about being alone in this world, right? Hurry is the pace that we run at. Dallas Willard, he is a writer on spiritual disciplines, fabulous mind, and he writes the book Spirit of the Disciplines, and he writes this also. He says, hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Carl Jung is a spiritualist. He's not a follower of Christ, but he had something interesting to say that I think tags to this. Hurry is not just of the devil, hurry is the devil, is what he would say. I think to Dallas Willard's point, hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life. Hurry will always distract, downplay, and dilute my spiritual journey or spiritual life. Hurry, and like I said before, and love cannot coexist. Hurry does not promote rest. Hurry does not promote listening. Hurry does not promote being present. Like, in a state of hurry and hustle, I cannot be present. I cannot listen to God the Father, and I cannot rest in what he has done for me. Hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life. So we're going to talk through that. Hurry, it never stops to allow me to follow Jesus. We're going to talk through how did Jesus run into life? Because I don't think Jesus, he set a pace that he was not at hurry. If you read the Gospels, if you read the story of Jesus, Jesus was never in a hurry. He had a mission, it was the cross. But when he was walking, right, and he was spending time with the disciples, he was never in a hurry. He was very much in the moment and present to that. So we're going to look at, how did Jesus practice this? How did Jesus practice this? If we are all hurry sick, right? If we're all hurry sick, we got to go seek the one who never suffered from hurry sickness and see what his practice was and what he has to say about that. Jesus, in the Gospels, we see he never hurried, and Jesus was very present to the moment and others, like I said. And before we get into that, I think this is valuable to us, kind of a definition of solitude. John Ortberg writes this: solitude is the one place where we can gain freedom from the forces of the society that will otherwise relentlessly mold us. Right? Solitude is the one place we can gain freedom from the forces of society that will mold us. This is what I would say, kind of pare it down to layman's terms, right? Solitude is intentionally drawing away from the world to enter God's presence. Solitude is intentionally drawing away from the world to enter God's presence. Not like we're Christians and we're going to draw away from the world and not interact with you. No. It is taking intentional time to draw away from all the noise and distractions and busyness to enter the presence of God. I would write this down. Solitude ushers me into the presence of God. Okay, think of it like this. I don't know if this is helpful or not for you, but think of it as a wedding. You walk into a building or a church for the wedding, and you have ushers in the back. They're going to usher you down to your seat, and they're going to seat you so that you are very present and focused on the bride and the groom and the ceremony that's going to take place. Think of solitude like that. It ushers us into the seat to be present with God. Right? And Jesus did this all the time. He stayed connected to his Father in heaven. He ushered into this, and he ran into it with conversation and listening and rest. He wanted to be with his Father. He wanted to be present with God no matter the situation. But I also think solitude allows me to be present with others. Solitude allows me to be present with others. And you're like, isn't solitude mean being by yourself? Yes. But I think, as Richard Foster says, the fruit of solitude in silence is compassion, sensitivity, and love for others. That as you spend time in solitude, it transforms your heart, right? It transforms your heart to interact with others. As you walk out of that and you see Jesus, he always entered into connection with his Father, time with his Father, and you would come out of that and you would see the compassion immediately after that. You'd see the love and the grace and the mercy he had with other people. He was willing to be present in the moment with people and their needs and desires and wants. Now let's look at some passages where Jesus demonstrates this. Now, solitude and silence, what we're talking about today, there's not necessarily like this key passage that goes through 15 verses of the why, the how, the what, all those things. So we're going to have to look at Jesus' life. And I was struck by reading through these passages and going through the sermon series guide. As you walk through the Gospels, it is very evident if you watch Jesus' actions that he lives this out in habit and in routine. It is fascinating, and I would challenge you to look at it like that as he plays it out. But let's start in Matthew 4, verse 1 and 2. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Let me give you some context to this. Matthew 3 ends by Jesus. He's being baptized by John the Baptist. Right? We see that God the Father speaks identity and love and truth into Jesus. You are my Son whom I love. And we see the Spirit of God is present in that scene also. And then in Matthew 4, right away, we see that Jesus was led by the Spirit. That Jesus, it was an intentional walking into the wilderness, and the Spirit led him into that to be tempted by the devil. But what do I want you to see here? First thing is this: solitude has a place. Solitude has a place. That word wilderness is what we're going to look at and hone in on. That word wilderness in the Greek is eremos. And it doesn't only mean wilderness, but it means desert, solitary place, lonely place, or quiet place. This is not just a sandy, hot, kind of arid desert land that Jesus kind of roams into and he's like, oh, I wonder what's in here, and we're going to walk around for a little bit. No, he intentionally was led by the Spirit into a place of loneliness, into a place of quiet, into a solitary place. And that is the wilderness that's stated in Matthew 4, that Jesus literally entered his ministry. The start of his ministry was entering into that wilderness, entering into that time of solitude. Right? It'd be interesting, right? This is how Jesus started the ministry. It'd be interesting, right? You voted me in to be campus pastor, and I came the next week, and I said, you know what? How I'm going to start the ministry here is I'm going to go down to the cabins in Tennessee, in the mountains of Tennessee, and spend 40 days and 40 nights there. You'd be like, what are you talking about, right? But that's how Jesus started it. And I think that wilderness, and when we read this, the desert place, we often think of that's a place of weakness. It's a place of weakness, right? Struggle and hardship, and it can be, yes. But John Mark Comer says this: what if this was a place of strength as Jesus ran into the temptation of the devil? What if this place of solitary, quiet, and alone time with his Father was a place of 40 days of him connecting and building strength into what he's about to face after that 40 days of fasting and 40 nights of fasting? Jesus knew the importance of having a physical place to enter for silence and solitude. That's key. This is not just a mental place. This is not just an emotional place. It was a physical place that he ran into. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Mark 1, 35 through 37 is the next passage we'll go to. It was fascinating. I was reading a commentary or kind of some notes about this. Commentaries would say that this book of Mark writing, is a busy book. They would say that we would define it as a busy book, that as you read Mark and as you read through the Gospel of Mark, every single chapter is just something new Jesus is about to jump into. It doesn't have time where it's just sitting and like, oh, this is cool. No, it's like one thing after another, one thing after another. And we get to verse 35 in chapter 1, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, went off to a solitary place where he prayed. So he had a place that he went to. Simon and his companions went to look for him. And when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." That scholars would say Jesus' first day of ministry was laid out in Mark 1. He got ordained, he hired a staff, he drove out impure spirits, he healed many people, and he taught and preached. That was his first day of ministry. It sounds like a busy, busy day, right? And then you see the next day, he woke up, it was still dark out, and he went to a solitary place to be with God the Father, right? Jesus, his solitude was intentional. It was intentional. I'd have you write that down. That Jesus, even in the busyness of life, the full day, the lots of things happening, people need you, Jesus. He was intentional to run into solitude with his Father. Like, this was not just kind of willy-nilly, right? Well, I guess if I have time here, if I do this here, maybe that here. No, it was very intentional even after the craziness of a day that he had. Solitude and silence was a natural thing for Jesus. Next passage I would point you to is Mark 6. Mark 6. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat. I don't know how many of you have been on a day like that where you're like, lunch passed? What, it's like 3 o'clock? I don't know, right? That was the day they were having. He said to them, "Come with me, buy yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Solitude has a purpose. Solitude has a purpose. This day is going crazy for the disciples. They're running around. They're trying to figure out the needs and the wants of everybody. We got to meet these needs. Jesus, come on. We got to figure it out. We haven't even eaten yet. You know how busy we are? And Jesus is like, whoa, wait. Come with me. Be a place of rest. I want you to be with me. That this idea of solitude is not me time. It's not just like, I'm going to go sit on the couch, turn on Netflix, we'll eat Cheetos. It's not just me time. I'm going to break away, do this thing. It has a purpose connected to it, and the purpose is to run into the presence of God. That Jesus says, be with me. Like, spend time with me in solitude and silence. Pray and listen and rest in this moment. Like, this is not just kind of, we'll spend an hour just kind of laying on the couch. Like, you can start there. He says, I want to have a conversation with you. I want to hear from you. I want you to listen to me. I want you to rest in what I've done for you. And he invites the disciples in on that and says, come rest. Come be with me. I want to spend time with you. Luke 22, the last passage. So we see that there's a purpose, a place, and it's intentional, right? Lastly, this is Jesus, or Luke's writing about Jesus. Jesus is at the end of his life on this earth. He's about to be taken to the cross, and he goes to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane. And this is what Luke has to write. Jesus went out as usual, keyword there, to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed. I write this down. Solitude is a habit. Solitude is a habit. If you notice how Luke writes, he says this is the usual place for Jesus, that he would go here often. I think it's fascinating. Jesus knows what's coming. He knows he's about to take the cross. He knows he's going to die a brutal death, and he knows what's about to come, and yet he says, I want to spend time with my Father in heaven. I want to spend time in solitude and silence. I want to go to my usual spot. It is a habit for me. Or I want to be consistent and intentional with this habit, whether it's in celebratory moments and excitement, or it's in the valleys and the deepest lows that I can walk through. I'm going to create this habit. Jesus sets the ultimate example for us when it comes to solitude and silence. Right? He sets the ultimate example. He goes in with a purpose. It's a habit. It's intentional. And there is a physical place. Right? So how do we do this? How do we do this? And let me just state this. I want your eyes up here. Let me just state this because this might be going through your minds right now, okay? There is not a one-size-fits-all application to this, okay? There can't be. So I won't be able to go through for you and for you and for you and for you. This is how it's going to work. But we're going to walk through as I'm going to speak into maybe some of how I do it, some of what Jesus kind of tells us to move forward with. And this is some action put into play, creating a habit in your life. Because single moms will have a very different picture than retirees, from a business owner to a family of 5 or 6 or 7. It's going to look different for every single one of us in this room, and figuring out how you can put into play this habit in your life, especially in 2020. Right? How do we do this in 2020? Because I think this practice, when I even talk about it or when I studied it, at first I'm like, this is kind of like the super religious people do this, or maybe this is kind of like a hippie format of like, I don't know what to do with this time of solitude and silence. For some of us, maybe it's just this checklist thing. It might be this checklist thing that you're like, I just kind of have to do it, and this is kind of what we're talking about, and I get my Bible and I pray and we're done for the day. And I want to speak into the importance of this. I think this is one of the most valuable things that you can put as a habit into your life. Some scholars would say this is the number one practice. I won't go as far as that, but I would say if you don't have practices set in place, start with this, because it ushers me into the presence of God. And when I enter the presence of God, God will allow transformation in my life to take place. Let's look at a passage, Romans 12. It says this, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Remember what John Ortberg said? He said, solitude allows us to gain freedom from what the world and the culture and the society would say, you need to put in habit this and you need to put into place this. It gains freedom from allowing the culture to run our lives in the hurry, in the hustle. The mind being transformed, running into the presence of God, right? Hurry, I think, drives us into the worries of the world. And I think hurry drives us to distractions. I think hurry runs us into the worries of the world and drives us into distractions. And we need to run into this and say, how can I enter? What is a habit I can enter into the presence of God to allow transformation to take place? I was reading a lot of books on this, and I ran across a story. I can't remember which book it's in, but it's about a basset hound, okay? His name is Tattoo. Look at that picture right there. Come on now. His name is Tattoo. I'm not sure why his name is Tattoo. I'm not sure it's a true story, though. So his owner took Tattoo. They went in the car, and they drove to a park. It's going to be a nice spring day, walking in the park, going on a trail. They're real excited, and so Tattoo's plugging along. They get back to the parking lot, and I don't know how this happened, okay? I'm not a dog owner, so I don't know if this is like possible or this happens, but Tattoo's owner happened to not put Tattoo in the car, but got its leash stuck into one of the doors and didn't realize that Tattoo wasn't in the car. It's a true story. I don't know how it happens. I'm not sure why you would do that to your dog. I'm not sure. But he started driving away. And Tattoo, this poor basset hound, has his leash stuck to the door. It's jammed into the door, and he is outside the car. And his owner starts driving away, going about 20, 25 miles per hour on these roads, getting back home. And this poor basset hound is just like trying its hardest to keep up with the car. And you look at that dog, it's not got long legs. It's not like a greyhound rolling through the streets, And so it's just running, and after a while, it starts to get rolled and tossed, and it's tripping, and it's falling. The poor dog is just getting beat up. It cannot keep up. And there was a police officer sitting on the side of the road, saw this taking place as the car passed by. He pulled out, got the lights, sirens on, stopped the car, got Tattoo all figured out, and got Tattoo back in the car. Tattoo was okay. Didn't die or anything like that. He was okay, but he was exhausted and tired. And he was just trying to keep up and couldn't keep up and getting thrown here and there and everywhere. And that's where some of us are this morning. We're just like Tattoo. We got our leash stuck into the door, and the car of hurry and life and hustle and family life is just going and going, and we are just trying to keep up. We're just trying to keep up. After 2 or 3 or 4 weeks into this new year, you start to roll. You start to trip. You start to get beat up. You can't do it anymore, and things are falling through, and you're just exhausted. You don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. And you're asking yourself, is this really what life's all about? Is this really what life's all about? I can't even imagine keeping this pace for a long time. And Jesus says something interesting in Matthew 11. This is the Message version. I want to speak into that. It's a paraphrase version. I wouldn't normally go to this, but I think it says it well for what Jesus is talking about in here. Are you tired, Jesus says, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I would write that down. It's worth noting. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Are you tired? Are you worn out? For some of us, are you burnt out by religion? And you're just sitting there and you're like, I just can't believe we got here this Sunday. I just can't believe we got this Sunday. Just grateful we're here, just kind of plugging along, because that's where some of us are at. This is where we're at. We're exhausted and tired. And for some of us, we walk in here, and maybe this Jesus thing or church thing, maybe it's new to you, and you're like, I can relate to that. I am hurry sick. We're just running. We're going crazy, and I don't know what to do. And life is just overwhelming, and I can't even imagine. I'm trying to figure all the pieces out, and I'm trying to do good enough, and I'm trying to accomplish enough. I'm trying to kind of create an identity for myself. I'm trying, so that maybe God kind of looks upon me with favor, and maybe I can get into the right, and maybe I can figure out how to journey into that. And I would say, slow down. Jesus says, come to me. He says, before anything else, I want you to say yes to me and lay that all down at the foot of the cross. That's where it all starts for us. For every single one of us in this room, we have to start at that point. That we can be running and trying and doing and accomplishing and creating an identity, and it will never suffice to get us into the right with God and into a relationship with God or live life to its fullest. And Jesus said, no, I've come to live this life and to go to the cross for all of us who are hurried and sick and tired. And I want you to say yes to me and putting your faith into me and believing in me, but ultimately resting in what I've done on the cross for you. There's nothing that you can do. You can't be good enough. You can't try hard enough. There's nothing. Say yes to me. That you accept that you're a sinner and you're flawed, that you embrace the good news of Jesus and what he's done for us on the cross, and you believe that he is the Savior, and you say yes. That's where some of us need to start this morning, right? You never said yes to Jesus. You're like, I was going to lay it down here. For others of us, like myself, you said yes to Jesus. You've done that. You've lived many years maybe saying yes to Jesus, right? You've lived this life, and you come in this morning and you're like, Jesus promised me life and life to the fullest, and I am not experiencing that. I'm experiencing the farthest thing from that. We are always hurried. We're hustling. We're trying to fit in. We're trying to do this. I'm exhausted. If this is life, I don't want to be a part of this hurried life anymore. I'm done, right? And for you, you say yes to Jesus. You said yes to Jesus. You have the Spirit of God living inside of you, which leads to transformation. And we're talking about these practices for that particular reason because it ushers us into the presence of God. And for you, it's saying, how can solitude and silence take place and take habit in my life? And the first thing I would say is this. I'd write it down. It's not on the screen. I would say this. Slow down. You got to start there. Slow down. You're like, what do you mean by that? I mean this. Drive the speed limit. Drive the speed limit. Just go 35 and a 35. Just start setting practices in your place that you are slowing down. Turn off your email for a day so you're not getting email notifications. Put your phone in a different room than the family is. Slow down your life. John Mark Comer says, put your phone to bed before you go to bed and wake your phone up after you wake up. Like you got to have parameters slowing down, right? As a family, maybe it's not saying yes to everything. Maybe it's putting parameters on how fast you are going. Listen, I am in that world, right? We're about to have our second kid. It's going to get crazy, and it's saying, how can we slow down? We need to start there because we're going at such a fast pace. And then it's saying, how can I enter in and start to carve out time for solitude and silence? And like I said, this is not a one-size-fits-all for everybody. So I cannot come up here and say, 4 a.m, you wake up, and that's when you do it. Because you'd all be looking at me and like, I work third shift, or I'm just not a morning person, or you don't know kids. I have 4 kids. It's not going to happen, right? But here's what I'm going to say. A couple things, And I'll speak into kind of how I do these things. First is this, finding a place of solitude and silence, kind of some practical examples. Find a place, just like Jesus did. Find a place. For me, that is downstairs in our living room. I have a couch with a side table where I put my coffee. That's my place. Right? For you, maybe it's in the back room, maybe it's in your bedroom, maybe it's out in a park somewhere, maybe it's a coffee shop. Find your place. You have to find a physical place. This is not just a mental state that I can figure out. Find a place. I was talking to a lady. She picks up her kids in the car line. She has about a 45-minute window. That's her place, in the car, picking her kids up after school. Like, that's the place. Like, find your place. For some of you, it's different places like that. Have a plan. Have a plan. Right? Read through maybe a gospel passage. Read through the Psalms. Listen. Spend time just listening in prayer, seeking out God and saying, God, what do you have to say to me? Maybe it's just resting for like 10 or 15 minutes. Just resting in who he is and what he has done for you and just saying, okay, let's just start the day like this and then run into the Gospels. Create a habit. You have to create a habit of it. This is all what Jesus, this is not trickery. This is not like my science. It's like, this is what Jesus did. He created a habit. Find a place with a plan and purposely lay it out with a habit saying, I'm going to do this daily. Daily, I'm going to set this into place. And here's key. Stay with it. Be consistent. Please, I think this is I wouldn't go that far. This is one of the top things that I would tell students and adults alike. You have to stay with it. Following Jesus sometimes is grinding it out, even when it doesn't feel like it, and even when it's confusing and hard. When you go into solitude and silence, your mind will be bouncing things everywhere. You will not be able to focus. You'll be thinking about what to do that day, what's for breakfast. You'll be thinking about your kids, all this stuff. Stay with it. Don't get discouraged. Keep running to God in solitude and silence. I think John Mark Comer says it perfectly. Here's to tomorrow morning, he says, 6 o'clock, coffee, the chair by the window by the tree, time to breathe, a psalm and a story from the Gospels, hearing the Father's voice, pouring out my own, or just sitting and resting. Maybe I'll hear a word from God that will alter my destiny. Maybe I'll just process my anger over something that's bothering me. Next slide. Maybe I'll feel my mind settle like untouched water. Maybe my mind will ricochet from thought to thought, which I have been multiple times this week, and never come to rest. If so, that's fine. I'll be back, same time tomorrow, starting my day in the quiet place. Question is, you. Right? You. What is that quiet place for you? Right? This can feel kind of like abnormal, and this doesn't make sense, and how do we put this into play? And here's my challenge. I cannot one-size-fits-all application this and say, go do this, and this is what you're supposed to do. Find a rhythm, an unforced rhythm of grace that you can connect to, that you can have a place and a plan and ultimately a habit that you're running into the presence of God that leads to transformation, which will allow you to be present to others as you walk through life. It will alter your rhythm of life. It will alter your family's rhythm of life in a extremely good way, I believe. So why don't we pray?